Welcome to the Mission Brain Podcast, the official podcast of the Mission Brain Foundation, bringing insights into the fascinating realm of global neurosurgery. The Mission Brain Hackathon is a virtual multidisciplinary and multinational 3-day event to tackle real-world challenge in global neurosurgery.
Let's start from the very beginning. What is a hackathon? How is it different from traditional hackathons? And what is the sentiment that underlies this idea? How did you conceive it?
So I think the hackathon, the concept of a hackathon is something that we lifted kind of from the tech world, where they're super common. You hear about people or companies hosting like case or design competitions where they invite a bunch of participants to come, usually to a centralized campus in person. And those participants are given some kind of case, which represents a problem that the company is actively trying to solve. And the participants then design some solution for that case. And I think hackathons have become increasingly popular in the healthcare space. So now you'll see like hospital systems running hackathons and pharmaceutical companies doing it. And I think the bottom line thus far has been financial. Like, I think the main motivation for holding hackathons is to come up with ideas for revenue generation. But ultimately, the core philosophy is just if you bring enough bright, passionate people to the same physical or mental space, you can, and put them in proximity with each other and get them to talk to each other in the span of a weekend, you can hopefully, come up with the next great invention or idea. And so I think that's really what we were striving to do with the Mission Brain Hackathon last year. I think being in global health or adjacent to global health, as we all are, things can start to feel quite fatalistic. Like you read about all these disparities, you talk about disparities, and you wonder why it seems so hard to fix disparities. And so what we really wanted to do was challenge people from around the world to come together, to think about how to fix disparities, to propose new ideas when it comes to neurosurgical care delivery. Those could be, hardware ideas. This is the new device we're going to use. Software. This is like an app that we think will make communication between doctors or between patients and doctors easier. Policy, like this is how we plan to finance procedures moving forward so that more patients can afford them. When we started the hackathon, we were really hoping to get sort of these multidisciplinary groups of people collaborating with each other to attack the problem of disparities in global neurosurgical access from as many angles as possible. And I think we really succeeded with that last year. We just under 100 participants at the hackathon, many of whom were Mission Brain affiliated, and we had about 35 teams. And the ideas were just so phenomenal. I mean, people spent like 24, 36 hours on them. And so you'd imagine that the caliber couldn't be that high, right? Like, 36 hours, what really gets done in 36 hours? But we were actually completely blown away by the amount of innovation that was able to happen. And I think like it really the startling and amazing thing for me was just how much the lived experience of the participants, many of whom live in low and middle income countries, get healthcare in like their local health systems or are medical students or professionals in their health systems, just how much they were able to bring to the table and how instrumental that was in shaping their design thinking, which, that was just incredible. And so this year we were hoping to, replicate that experience, but also expand to do a bigger and better job. And so we've doubled the number of participants that we're recruiting this year. We've invited a whole lot more judges to come to offer their views and feedback on the different projects that we're going to see. I think this year's hackathon is about creating solutions that stick. It's about building out a better network of people who are inspired to improve global neurosurgical care. It's about allowing folks from low and middle income countries to interface with folks from high income countries, allowing early career individuals to interface with experts and luminaries in the field of global neurosurgery. So we just want to get some people ideating together ultimately.
Han, do you have anything to add to that?
I mean, what can I say? I mean, she covered like everything from the inception to where we are now. I don't think I have too much to add except just a little color. The idea that, Upper was talking about with tech companies, like this idea of action team learning has been around since like the Industrial Revolution, right? And then also like with more academy companies like Procter and Gamble and some of these other companies that had like these leadership institutes where they would put these teams together. Here's a problem, solve it, right? And this form of action learning has evolved a lot over the years. And then in tech companies, they termed it a hackathon because you're using code to come up with hacks to solve software issues. And the fact that we're continuously using innovative solutions and hacks to come up with solutions to barriers in global neurosurgery, I think is really cool. The other piece I would say is why we settled on the hackathon. I think that's one thing that really accentuates how amazing it is to have Mission Brain chapters globally. One thing that we wanted to do with our chapter when we decided on starting the hackathon was, how do we connect everyone? We're going on these town hall calls. We're hearing from people from Pakistan and India and Mexico and Italy, but we're not getting to interact or work together in any reasonable way. And what we thought was an opportunity to create these connections, especially with the cultural shift of being more comfortable on Zoom, right? And having more access to internet. And the fact that our world has gotten a lot smaller for those reasons. For example, like we're all three different places right now. You're 1,000 miles away and we're able to talk to you very easily, was something that we wanted to capitalize on with the hackathon. So to bring all the teams together and really gain the benefits and the fruits of having so many diverse perspectives in the Mission Brain family was a big reason why the hackathon was born. And so it's been fun to kind of see that blossom. Last year, we had over 40 countries represented in the applicant pool. This year, we hit that number again, over 40 countries represented in the applicant pool. And it's just been wonderful to try to grow the network, as Aparna mentioned, but also the reach of connecting people across all these barriers, from high-income countries to low and middle-income countries, to students, to non-students, to just people with different backgrounds. And as she said, when you put these amazing minds together in a very contained time frame, what you see is remarkable.
Yeah, one thing that really fascinates me is how you put people together into teams, because some people apply as teams and some people apply as individuals. And I guess what you're doing right now is looking at all these individuals and seeing how would they be complementary? What does a good team look like? And what are features that come together well? So I was wondering what your process is with pairing people.
So I'm going to steal Aparna's move here. So Aparna is our main matchmaker this year. So I think she can speak very candidly to her process. And I think we learned a lot from last year about inefficiencies in the process and also a better way to do it. However, and last year our winning team was made up of people who applied as a duo and then also someone who applied as a single applicant from different backgrounds. And so I think it's just really wonderful to figure out how that process works. But I will head you over to the head chef who understands the secret sauce of putting those teams together.
I don't know anything about secret sauce, so I can neither confirm nor deny. But I do think that last year, it was our first year, we were going a lot off vibe. Like, who did we think would gel well together? Whose backgrounds, as you put it, Luca, so well, are complementary. And I think this year we're hoping to still retain some of that like instinct while making things much more systematic. So we have like a scoring procedure set up. We're going to try to make sure that we put together teams that are evenly matched, in the sense that we don't want like a super top heavy team where everyone has like a very traditionally quote unquote academically successful background, because we realize that a lot of times participants who have more resources, who've been given more resources, are just going to have maybe accomplished more, in their careers thus far. And that's not a bad thing. I mean, that experience can be very, very useful when coupled with the maybe real world experience or innate problem solving ability of someone who just hasn't had all those resources. And so we're just working really hard to make sure that our teams are really well balanced. We're working really hard to make sure that our teams can actually interact with each other, that they're not in like totally disparate time zones and won't be, asleep or awake at totally different hours.
That was an issue last year, I recall.
Yeah, exactly. That was definitely something that a few of the teams ran into as a problem last year. So yeah, I think we're just hoping to make some matches. We're hoping that things go a little bit more smoothly this year, our second time around the block. But I'm very, very excited. We're going to be finalizing our team this weekend, and I'm super excited for them to get to know each other before the hackathon.
Yeah, Aparna is our Hinge algorithm. You know, Hinge has the algorithm. She's the Hinge algorithm. So last year there was an applicant that I reviewed. Okay, applicant currently, for the point of the story, will remain nameless. And we had a whole discussion about this applicant because I think he was like on the border for something. We weren't really sure if he had enough experience in medicine, and we wanted to put him together with another team. And this whole time, Aparna's face just completely stone cold. Like we had no idea that she even knew who the applicant was, like any ties to it. We're just having like this very heated discussion. And in the end, I was like fighting so hard. I was like, he's going to be great. His essays were great. I really think he'd fit good with this group. And then we wrap up. He makes the cut as a participant. His team ends up winning, and turns out he is a really good friend of Aparna's, and she didn't want to say anything the whole time because she's like, I'm not going to bias the selection process.
That is intellectually honest.
No, yeah, we had no idea. So in that sense, yes. So we really try really hard.
Great from Hinge is that there are no pictures. So I can't just put together the people who I think would look like they would work together.
Yeah, there you go.
Perfect. So one big novelty that you have going for you this year is that you won't be organizing this alone. You've been coming together with other associations, with other Mission Brain chapters like UNAM, like University of Alabama, and Mayo. So why have you opted for this collaboration, and how has it been working out for you guys?
So the idea behind the hackathon is we talked a little bit about expanding the hackathon, expanding the ownership. We talked a little bit about this at the beginning, just in terms of the true sense of a great leader is making sure that you do things in a way that you're replaceable, that, you know, whatever your focus is and whatever you try to build as a team lives on, whether you're there or not. And so part of the reason why we expanded to include other chapters was to create an environment of inclusiveness and also bridging resources, which is the point of the hackathon, right? Between our know-how of how to run the hackathon and the network that we were able to build and the other Mission Brain chapters that we're interested in supporting. And so this has been a very experimental year in a lot of different ways, because we're managing, as a leadership team for the hackathon, we're managing a team of volunteering full-time medical students in different parts of the United States. And it's not easy because people have different responsibilities. They have different timelines. They have different, I would say, expectations for what participating means and what that looks like. And so for us, it has been a lesson in delegation, in patience, in communication, and that I think we have a lot to learn and grow on for next in terms of how we incorporate additional teams. But it's been really wonderful to work with the teams that, you know, from UNAM to Destiny at Mayo to Pedram at UAB. So I think the opportunity is there. And working and expanding our network has been a growing process, but also a really important aspect of the development of the hackathon, because it's not okay to just have a vision, but having a vision, a plan, execution, all that really comes into play as we're expanding. So that's something that, you know, we're really leaning into this year and growing, and hopefully we can build upon for future years.
And I'll add, I think something that I was in particular really excited for was the collaboration with UNAM. I mean, of course, Destiny and Pedram have been amazing as well. But I think last year, something that I felt a little unsettled about was that I was writing this case, or I was writing with Ivo, who was one of the co-organizers of last year's hackathon, about, you know, XY, a Nahua girl in Mexico, or JR, an indigent, like older adult in Mexico. And I was like, I have really no clue what it means to be either of those people. I don't know XY or JR. I don't live in Mexico. I'm going to do the best I can. And Ivo was going to do the best he could too. And Ivo's from Chile. So I guess he maybe had a little more insight than I did, but, you know, not that much more comparatively. And of course, we talked to the Mission Brain staff. We talked to Paula. We got we had all our ducks in a row, and we got all the research we needed to write the case. But ultimately, you know, it was as authentic as we could make it, but it couldn't be perfectly authentic. And this year, I've just been so happy to be working with Jorge and Diego and JP because, as folks who live in Mexico, who are medical students in Mexico, right? They have that extra insight that we just didn't last year. And it's been so helpful to have them working on the case with us because we've really been able to flesh out a story that feels more real, more meaningful, more high fidelity. And yeah, I'm so happy about that.
Great. So how do you feel, what do you feel are the novelties of this year's event? And how do you think this event is going to be better than last year's?
We've got more people. More people means more awesome ideas. I think that's really huge for us. Last year's hackathon was organized in collaboration with MIT Hacking Medicine, which is a group that puts on a lot of hackathons for a lot of different folks every year. And I think we leaned on them to spread the word about the hackathon, to help us recruit. And I was frankly a little apprehensive going into this one, do we have a strong enough network and a wide enough network to actually get people excited about the hackathon by ourselves? I mean, you never truly do anything in isolation, especially not with social media, but I think it's been very powerful to realize just how big the Mission Brain family is, and to realize that, there are still folks, even though we've only done one of these in the past, there's still folks from all over the world who are really excited to join us. And that's allowed us to just broaden our reach this year, double the number of participants, double the number of judges, probably the same number of mentors. They'll just have to work a little harder. But yeah, I think that's the big novelty this year. And we have more opportunities as a result. We have some cool new sponsors, Upsurgeon, Mayo Clinic Press, and we're having talks from both parties at the hackathon, short talks, but I think it'll be a wonderful way for participants to learn a little more about the landscape of global neurosurgery or just tech and digital innovation from a more bird's eye view from people who have been thinking about those things from a pretty long time. We have an awesome panel lined up. So yeah, we're just growing. We're getting bigger.
Our programming is also more intentional this year. To Aparna's point, we have a global neurosurgery panel with residents who are going to be talking about their career pathways, and also a neurosurgeon. So I think it's just going to be a wonderful experience. And then we're having a keynote by Dr. Haglund, who's going to talk a lot about his efforts to expand global neurosurgery in Uganda. And I think that focused, intentional networking outreach, and also speaking from experts and people who have lived experience in addressing global neurosurgical barriers, I think will be really fortuitous this year. It wasn't as big of a focus as last year, as was the networking and the actual projects, but this is the additional component of intentional programming. I think will be really awesome.
Very nice. So let's unpack this a little bit. Many of the participants of the hackathon will be listening to this, and this will be coming out before the hackathon. So what should a participant expect from this event, and what should they bring to the table in order to have a good experience?
So there are two parts to your question. What should they expect, and how can they make the most of the experience? So for us, I think expectations of the hackathon are different if you're coming in as a preformed team of 3, which is about half of the applicants, versus someone who's coming in to meet people, right? So in terms of expectation, I think those two different parties might have different expectations in terms of what they're looking for in the hackathon. But I will say what we are offering are, one, opportunities to network and connect with people that you otherwise would not connect with, whether that be participants, meaning your teammates that maybe you didn't know before, whether that be competitors in the Slack that you might appreciate their idea, their project, or you really enjoyed meeting with them, and we're going to have a mixer now the night before the hack or the day before the hackathon starts. So that opportunity to network with fellow competitors, teammates, mentors that you would otherwise have not been able to interact with on a regular basis, and even judges, and also people who are our sponsors. These are all opportunities to network and meet people and hear from people on our panels and our keynotes that you otherwise would not have the opportunity to hear from if you live in a different country, or if you go to a different school, or if you're just not interacting with them on a regular basis. And so the expectation would be to come in and hopefully be open to the opportunity of experiencing global neurosurgery and global health in a way that maybe you haven't had the opportunity to do before. And so I think that's the most general, broad sense I can say of what one can bring to the hackathon as a mindset. And the second thing, how to really enjoy the hackathon, just dig deep into it, right? Reach out, make yourself available and aware, and be open and communicative with everyone that you can speak with. Don't be so focused on having, your team being like the most important and best product. That is a huge part of it, right? But that should not be the only focus. I think in tandem with this idea of creating a really intellectually stimulating environment and an innovative idea is also appreciating the other people who are doing it with you and the people that you are presenting it to. Because, medicine, global neurosurgery in itself is a very small field. And so the opportunity to interact and collaborate with people in a setting like this is one that doesn't always come along, especially as a young trainee and a medical student, right? Before you even start residency, before you're in the career that you're hoping to pursue, if neurosurgery is it. And if it's not, that's fine as well. But I think being aware of how important the network is that you're working with and being open to that, in addition to striving to, develop the best idea and project, I think that would really facilitate having a wonderful hackathon experience. Aparna, do you have any additional thoughts on that?
I really agree with you, Han. I think it's so important to remember that change doesn't happen in a vacuum. We need a village of people, more than a village of people, who are willing to collaborate with each other to, make neurosurgery possible for every person in the world who needs it. And so I think everyone who comes to the hackathon, in order to have the best possible experience, has to be prepared to really engage with one another in a deep and honest way. And I also think that, as Han mentioned, obviously the solutions are not the be all and end all of the event, but I think it's such an important piece because design thinking can be super, super scary, right? Especially if you've never done it before, if you've never participated in an event like the hackathon. You're presented with a problem and you're given 36 hours to come up with an idea, and you're somehow supposed to solve the problem, except obviously the problem is pretty intractable, which is why it's being presented at the hackathon in the first place. So I think that can feel like such a daunting task. And I would say to any participants, keep an open mind and have confidence in yourself, because you can mine your own experiences, whether those are academic or personal experiences, and you have the common sense and the intellect and the wherewithal to come up with something really awesome. And don't feel like your idea needs to be in perfect shape, perfectly polished by the end of the hackathon. What I would love more than anything else is for a team to meet each other at the hackathon, to spend several hours ideating together, bringing an idea into sort of from a nascent stage to something that, is at least partially legible to the judges, and then continuing to work on their project together because they're really, really inspired by it, or because they feel galvanized by another pitch that they see at the hackathon. What I would love more than anything for people to continue to innovate together even after the hackathon is over. And so I think that can only happen if people come in with an open mind, ready to pour their creative juices into the weekend, and a great deal of confidence that they can do this, even though it's scary.
You've made some beautiful points, the both of you. First of all, Han, when it comes to networking and how actually building bridges between people is one of the main points of the event. And Aparna, you as well, speaking about how the important thing is not just connecting during the event, but incentivizing connection after the event, when the event is over, in order to make actionable changes. So one thing I was wondering is, do you have anything in place that wasn't there last year to incentivize either for different teams to come together more during the event or to interact more after the event, like incentives for that to happen more and for ideas to actually become reality? Because of course, the only way for them to become reality is for people to work on them. So I was wondering if you have anything set in place or if you were thinking of implementing something like that in the future.
Yes, I think one of the things that we have are these opportunities to be mentored by leaders in the field of innovation in healthcare. So one of the things that we didn't capitalize on last year was our partnership with Y Combinator, which is one of the biggest startup organizations in the world. and they have offered free coaching sessions to the top 3 winning teams. So they'll have the opportunity to connect with, the head of healthcare, I believe, at Y Combinator, and have a coaching. So they'll be able to work with her, the winning teams. The other piece is that Upsurgeon will have an honorable mention award in which they will also be incentivized. They're going to hand select a team outside of the top 3 that they will design an award around, depending on their idea. So if their idea is related to LMICs, or if their idea is related to innovation and education, they'll design an experience or an award around making sure they support that team's vision for whatever it is they want to accomplish. And then the final piece of it that I just want to acknowledge is that the goal of the hackathon, right, is not necessarily to form a company, right? But do we want to come up with solutions to barriers in healthcare? Of course, right? But it's also this piece of bridging those connections and being that initial step in the direction of, let's make the table wider so we can have better approach to solving these problems. And if we do that earlier as med students, right, as residents, then hopefully those breadcrumbs of this might be a better way to engage in a global health arena by finding those opportunities to connect with colleagues around the world. Then when we become, further along in our careers and we're able to develop projects, then we can have those people that we look back to and say, hey, can you help me with this? You have experience with this, or you're in this country, or you've done X, Y, and Z. Can you support? And a great example of that is the hackathon right now. So, speaking with you, we met just, a few months ago on a Mission Brain activity. I've developed what I feel like is a friend for life during my mission trip with JP, and we work together very closely now in a lot of different aspects of Mission Brain related items. Dr. Punchak was also on the trip, who is now working with us on the research aspect of the hackathon, and she's one of our panelists for the global neurosurgery. So my point is these connections are there, and we just have to find ways to grab them. So working on projects beyond the hackathon is an incentive and it's an opportunity, but to miss the opportunity, right, to connect and build those long-term relationships with other people, that shouldn't be forsaken for that, if that makes sense.
Oh, I agreed with that 100%. It's a spark that lights the fire. So one thing I was wondering if you could upon is, many people hear this conversation, but they don't see precisely what ideas came out of last year's hackathon, because the ideas that came out of the hackathon were really interesting and really could have real world applications. And I was wondering if you could have an example of something you were quite fond of last year that you thought was quite interesting and that may be applied in the real world.
Yeah, so I think a great example, not to put the spotlight on them overly much, but I think a great example of that is the winning team solution. Trevor, Jose, and Ignacio came up with this amazing project. Basically, they built a lightweight AI platform that analyzes a patient's gait and other movements while the patient is performing rehabilitation exercises after neurosurgery. And the AI extracts biomechanical parameters that can then be used by a physical therapist to sort of remotely inform decisions for that patient's rehabilitation regimen moving forward. So this is really an awesome tool that allows patients who can't actually get to a rehab center to perform their exercises, get real-time feedback from their physical therapist, and sort of track their own progress through their physical therapy, all using, the power of AI. And I think the real sort of nifty clincher here is that it's a super lightweight platform. It can run on a phone. So I think smartphone penetrance is really increasing even in low and middle income countries. And I think it's an idea that has a great deal of potential. Our judges obviously felt the same way, which is why Team Mumi won the hackathon. And their prototype was really fantastic. I know they've continued to work on it since. They were able to present their idea to the C-suite at Medica Sur Hospital in Mexico City, which Han can definitely talk more about. So that's an example of sort of the top tier innovation that we've seen at the hackathon last year.
Yeah, so I'll just continue with the presentation in Mexico, because the winning team got to attend a mission trip, right? And so they were able to do that, and I was a part of that with them. And I think it was really interesting to kind of be with them and alongside of them as they talked to a patient that could have benefited from product like theirs and an innovation like theirs. And also hear from healthcare professionals who are on the ground in Mexico and say, hey, this could work, but this is why there may be some barriers to it. Have you thought about this? Have you thought about, in terms of incorporation, have you thought about language barriers? Have you thought about access? All these different things that, if you think about it, you have 30 hours approximately of work time in the hackathon. You're not going to be able to necessarily build an entire company. But when you think about the opportunities there, I think it was a wonderful learning experience. I'll give a shout out to the team from Colombia, Damien Teasley, who they won second place, actually. So Damien and the team from Colombia came up with this idea of Neighbors Nearby, which addresses the issue of transportation to healthcare appointments and to follow-up appointments and to the hospital by utilizing local economy and local drivers to help facilitate that transportation. I think that was a wonderful example of a solution that maybe we haven't thought about before in low and middle income countries. And so we have a manuscript currently out that's currently being reviewed that actually has cataloged the solutions into different themes. I think we had 4 themes or so, general themes that we bucketed the different solutions in. And so hopefully we'll probably pay more attention to how we promote the ideas coming from the hackathon, maybe for future reference, but that is a part of what we're trying to do. Look at the solutions and share it with others. So maybe if there's something that somebody finds interesting, they can pursue it later on.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And of course, as you said, Han, the main point and the main goal of the hackathon isn't to make these things a reality in the short term. It's networking and meeting people and building bridges. But of course, I think we can do both things at the same time. I mean, the hackathon is already extremely successful. It's been bringing people together, as you said, magnificently. But there is a lot of untapped potential. So I was wondering if, we're together as the 3 of us, if we could just brainstorm a little bit on what the future of the hackathon could look like in, let's say, not 5 years, let's say in 1 year or 2 years. What could happen? What could we do to incentivize real products and real solutions being exposed to large patient bases and actually changing the world and changing paradigms? How do we get there from where we are right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think one way to do that is really to persuade our sponsors. As Han mentioned, Upsurgeon has already shown a vested interest in helping one of our top 3 teams, placing teams, grow their idea. And I think this is definitely a great strategy. Last year we had Stryker on board. We're hoping that Stryker is going to sponsor our hackathon again, or sponsor Mission Brain again this year. And I think as we can get more established med tech, med device companies involved in the hackathon, we also create a sort of incubator, a built-in incubator, where these companies can actually help our participants, can buy ideas from our participants, or our participants can go work at these companies as interns. I think that's maybe a more far off goal, but I think it's certainly reasonable and definitely one way to expand the actual impact of our hackathon. At the same time, I want to be mindful of the fact that I think people are participating in the hackathon for different reasons, and everyone may have a different idea about what they want to do with the technology they create, right? So I personally don't want to create an ecosystem in which everyone feels pressured to go get a patent after they come up with an idea at the hackathon. It'd be wonderful if people wanted to create more open source technologies. And I think that's also very viable strategy here. I think teams that come together that want to put their ideas even on GitHub, right? Just for other programmers and engineers, for example, to access. I think that is such an undersold and underrated method of innovation. And we really need to be thinking more about open source technology just in general in global health, especially given how expensive medical technology is. And we need to be thinking about ways to make it less expensive. And so I think depending on the values and the needs of each team, there are different strategies that we can take moving forward when it comes to actually seeing solution implementation. The Mission Brain trip, as Han pointed out, is another great avenue for this because it allows the winning team to actually do field research, as Han was describing, to improve their idea and, test it, or at least try to understand how it'd be deployed in their target population. So I think these are all ways in which we can try to increase the impact of the ideas coming out of the hackathon.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, I was speaking to Trevor, one of the winners of Movie in Mexico City, and I recall him telling me that he has so much going on in his life and he would have liked to pursue the idea of Move Me further, but he just didn't have the resources to do so. So, of course, as you said, we shouldn't convince people to pursue their ideas or just get a patent on anything that they develop during the hackathon. But it would be nice to enable them to do so if they so pleased, because many people would even like to put something and open source it. But the issue is that they wouldn't be allowed to survive because they're not paid a salary to be developing this full time. So that's something that I think we should solve. We should enable people with good ideas to come up with solutions and to make these solutions real and take them into the real world, saving real patients.
And I think as we grow as kind of an enterprise almost, we can begin to apply for grants that will allow, and like seed funding on behalf of our participants, or at least connect them with resources to do that for themselves, so that a good idea doesn't just, flicker into nothingness because of a lack of money. I think that would really be a shame. So hopefully that's something that as we gain more name recognition and our hackathon gains more name recognition, we can think about doing.
I'll also add that, you mentioned like what the lofty goals for the hackathon, and I know Aparna kind of painted this wonderful picture of what it could look like in the future. I'll also add that like MIT Hacking Medicine does in-person hackathons and also virtual hackathons, but they had a few really cool ideas that turned into very large companies, through their hackathons. And one of them was Pillbox. I think they were just acquired by Amazon for like $1 billion or something like that. And so I'm not saying that, that goal in terms of the financial incentive of creating a company is the most important thing. However, when you think about the ability to impact on a global scale, businesses have a unique opportunity to do so, especially in the global arena. And the opportunity to make it in person, right? Like Dr. Q has been really promoting this idea of having a global congress of Mission Brain chapters. And what if a version of our hackathon is in person, 2 days, you're working on an idea, which is part of the global congress, and you present to people who want to support the idea, right? With seed funding, and who want to give that to you for you to go on and try it out for 6 months on a non-convertible note and just see how that works. I think that would be awesome. But I think we're about maybe 3 to 5 years, very aggressively speaking, away from that. But yeah, that would be awesome, right? Can you imagine like a Shark Tank scenario where you got everybody coming up 5-minute pitches of their ideas to like the room full of everyone in the hackathon? That would be really cool.
It would be incredible. And as you said, Parna, one thing doesn't exclude the other. I mean, you can make something open source, but you just need the resources to be able to deal with it full time and do it full time. That's all you need. You don't necessarily need millions of dollars. You just need time to pursue it and the right amount of time to find the right people that can pursue it with you and make this happen. One other question I wanted to ask is, when it comes to new entries with judges, who are you most excited about? Who are you most fond of?
Well, one thing I will say is I'm really pleased to see how many of last year's judges are coming back. It's so wonderful, because it just reinforces, the fact that they had an excellent time. They loved all of the projects from last year and really feel like this is a worthwhile endeavor.
Even though it was our first go round, right? And our final judging session was so all over the place.
It was so haphazard. And yet they all still wanted to come back, which I think is both a testament to the high caliber of projects that we saw last year, and of course, like these judges' own commitment to the field of global neurosurgery. It's really remarkable. So we're really lucky to have our returning judges come back. And our new judges, many of whom, I have not been heavily involved in the recruitment of judges this year, but many of them have been, or were recommended to us by Dr. Q. And I'm really excited for the opportunity as well to connect with Dr. Q's colleagues more closely.
Yeah, I'll add that, last year we had 2 judging rooms, and this year we might have like 5. And so think about that for a second. Instead of having a more narrow scope, we're going to have more perspectives, right? And that's the whole point. And then also we've been very intentional about gathering people from different industries and different parts of the world. as judges. So this year, I think we're definitely more represented globally. And then the other thing I would add to that is the village of global health, global neurosurgery is really coming around to support this hackathon and what we're trying to do. Every judge or every person we reached out to for the opportunity to judge, even if they couldn't make it, they were still very supportive and very excited about the notion of joining next year, right? And planning their schedules around it. And so the fact that we're having just overwhelming support from everyone and the opportunity to really expand the scope of the hackathon from not only a participant perspective, right? But also from a mentor perspective and a judge perspective, I think that's really enticing.
Yeah. And the last thing I'll say about this is, we've been speaking about our judges, but our mentors are also fabulous. Many of our mentors are returning from last year. We've recruited several new mentors as well. And if there's one thing I think all three of us know about neurosurgeons is that they're incredibly busy. So the fact that everyone is willing to take time out of their weekends to, participate in this, whether they're a mentor or a judge, it's just, we can't thank everyone enough. And of course, this is also true for the non-neurosurgeons. So we so appreciate everyone's contributions to this hackathon.
And I saw that you have judges that are non-neurosurgeons, as you mentioned, from business, from innovation, all kinds of judges. I think Federico Nicolosi, the founder of Upsurgeon, who's actually Italian, is going to be one of the judges.
Yeah, he is.
One of the last questions I have is, how did you contact sponsors? I mean, Upsurgeon is an Italian company. How did you come to know about them, be aware of them? We've been working with Upsurgeon for around a year. It's Humanitas, so I was wondering how you learned about them.
We actually met Upsurgeon on a call with you guys back in the day.
Oh, really? That's interesting.
You, me, and Grant were talking to Dr. Nicolosi because he was in town in Boston, and then we had all the Humanitas folks on Zoom with us, like maybe last September or something like that. So we've been chatting with Dr. Nicolosi and the other Upsurgeon folks and people over at Humanitas about possibly doing some kind of collaborative thing. We never really fully fleshed that out for a few months now, and it's been great to lasso everyone into the hackathon like this. That's been really awesome.
So yeah, just to follow up on the Dr. Nicolosi point, I was able to even meet him in person when he was here in Boston, because he's working on some research with the MGA neurosurgery residents with Upsurgeon.
Three of us met, I think, yeah.
And we were contemplating a lot of different avenues for connection and collaboration with the suturing mission and some other items. And so that was our initial connection. And then with Mayo Clinic Press, a lot of our networking has been either through cold calls or connections from people that we know. And Dr. Q, he is having his book re-released by Mayo Clinic Press, the book that he wrote about his experience from being a migrant farm worker to being a neurosurgeon, becoming Dr. Q. And so for us, he suggested that we maybe reach out to them. And we've been doing a lot of pitching. I mean, I've never been so comfortable with pitching to different companies, because it's just been whoever we can talk to, whoever we can pitch our ideas to in our hackathon to, we've been jumping at the opportunity to do so, to tell them about the work that we're doing and how much we're looking to accomplish again this year. And so Mayo Clinic Press has been very gracious to support us, and they'll also be providing some of their authors to speak with us and free books, along with supporting the cash prizes. And Upsurgeon's also our platinum sponsor, and they're going to be supporting the main prize, and also going to be sharing about innovation in global neurosurgery and education. And so the opportunity to really connect with people who share this vision of impacting the future of healthcare in a positive way has been inspiring so far.
I remember you mentioning JP Navarro from Mexico City and your friendship. And I was speaking to him the other day about how the COVID pandemic paradoxically was constituted the ideal fertile environment for something like this to start, such a movement to develop. And of course, keeping the event online allows many people from many countries to come together without having to fly them in, keeping the expenses very low. But at the same time, it would be nice eventually to have something in person. And I was wondering if you were contemplating that or entertaining that for the future.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's the lofty goal for the 3 to 5 years with Dr. Q in the Global Congress, and we all meet in Cancun somewhere, somebody's hotel, and bang it out.
Okay, we got it.
Yeah.
I think we're good, and can't wait to see you guys on the 25th.
24th. Don't miss the first day, Luca. Thank you very much for speaking with us, Luca. This has been awesome.
No, thank you guys. I was really I really enjoyed this and really enjoyed listening to how this became something so big. This is now huge. 200 people in an online event from all around the world is such a great achievement. So proud of you guys.
We hope you enjoyed our first episode. To be interviewed and for inquiries, email us at podcast@missionbrain.org. To donate to the foundation, please visit www.missionbrain.org.